Good morning, Ms. Braley's class. I'm back to read Report Card to You, Chapter 7, New Location. I wonder if I turn this light off, if it might be better. Just a second. Let's try that. Is that better? Maybe that light's kind of distracting. I have my grandchildren watching a movie, and I'm not a big television person. You can just ask your Miss Braley and you'll know that. But I'm letting them watch a movie while I read you a chapter from Report Card. So I hope you have a great day and enjoy the story. This chapter is called The Element of Surprise. As I sat at the big round table between my mom and dad, remember they're at the conference, all those grown-ups were in there, all her teachers. As I sat at the big round table between my mom and dad, I felt like I was trapped in a sandwich. It was mealtime in the principal's office, and the main dish was sliced Nora. Miss Hackney liked big meetings. She always had. Almost every other week, she called an all-school assembly or an all-fifth grade meeting or an all-second grade meeting or some kind of gathering of kids and teachers. She said it gave the school cohesiveness. She said it created good group dynamics for all of us to see each other's faces. And she said meeting as a large group helped us solve our problems all together, all at once. That was clearly what she had in mind today. Miss Hackney sat down and took charge. Since Mr. and Miss Rowley asked for all of you to be here, perhaps they should mention a few of the concerns they shared with me this morning. Then maybe Nora's teachers can explain things from their perspective. And if she wants to, maybe Nora could share a little too. How does that sound? My mom nodded and smiled and cleared her throat. She was happy to talk first. Principals and teachers and counselors didn't frighten her one bit. She'd been trying to boss them around for ages, ever since the time she tried to push Anne into the gifted program 2 years earlier. My mom said, "We really appreciate all of you taking the time to come and talk. It's one of the things we've always loved about the Philbrook schools. Our first concern today, apart from Nora's grades themselves, is that we had no warning that there was a problem, not so much as a note or a phone call, and we'd like to understand how that happened." Nobody said anything for about 3 seconds, and then Miss Burns said, "I can only speak about Nora's grades and library skills, of course, but it's pretty clear what happened." Miss Byrne had her grade book open on the table in front of her. So did all my other teachers. My heart was pounding so hard that I was sure my mom and dad would hear it. Miss Byrne ran her finger index along a row of numbers. On the first 3 quizzes and our first reference search, Nora got scores that averaged out to about 72%, which is a low C. And that's what she had at the 7th week of the term. That's when we mail out academic warnings to parents. And since Nora didn't have a D or lower, there was no warning. Then, on the next quiz and our final internet research project, Nora did quite poorly, and that pulled her grade down. I entered her scores, calculated the average, and there it was. Miss Byrne looked at me and smiled. "Nora is one of the library's very best customers, so I didn't like having to give her a D, but that's the way it happened." Miss Jang nodded. "Exactly," she said. "Numbers are numbers, and an average is an average. Same thing in science and math classes for Nora. Her grades dropped right off at the end of the term, and that was it. No warning for you, no warning for me." All my other teachers started nodding and agreeing. Mr. McKay cleared his throat and said, "Ditto in gym class. C's all term, then a big fat F on the obstacle course fitness challenge. Dropped her to a D." I could tell my dad didn't like it when Mr. McKay said big fat F, but I sort of enjoyed it. I was proud of that F. I was probably the only kid in the history of the school to fail the obstacle course fitness challenge. It took a lot of creativity to look completely uncoordinated and totally out of shape. Mr. Drindler said, "I'd like to make an observation." He was the guidance counselor. He was also the psychologist for the school district. He opened a big folder and started shuffling papers around. I knew what the folder was. It was the Nora Rowley folder, all the records from my past 5 years at Philbrook Elementary School. As he looked at the papers on the table, Dr. Trindler put the palms of his hands together and then flexed them apart so that only the tips of his long, thin fingers were touching. Apart, together, apart, together. It made his hands look like a spider doing push-ups on a mirror. He adjusted his glasses, and then he tried to smile at my parents. He didn't look at me. Mr. and Miss Rowley, I know this sort of report card can be upsetting, but honestly, grades like this aren't that far out of line for Nora's mastery testing profile or with her academic history here at the elementary school. The Philbrook school system has very high standards. Nora's been an average student right there in the middle with room to move either way, and sometimes grades get tipped downward instead of upward. That's all. And sometimes performance can be related to all sorts of things. Things like unusual stresses at home, like losing a job or perhaps a death in the family. Sometimes even little disturbances can make a big difference. Right away, my dad leaned forward and said, "Are you pushing this problem back at me? Is that what you're doing? We're not talking about my job or our family life here. You people handed out almost a dozen D's, and you didn't even know what each other was doing. No one stepped up to help a kid who clearly needed some, and now it's somehow my fault? I don't like the sound of that. Not at all." Miss Hackney said, "I'm sure Dr. Trindler didn't mean to make it sound like this was anyone's fault, Mr. Rowley. We're certainly not trying to assign any blame here. We just want you to understand what happened so we can make the right adjustments." My dad didn't sit back, and Miss Hackney didn't want to ask him if he had more to say because he probably did. So she kept talking and said, "Well, one person we haven't heard yet from is Nora." And then looking at me, Miss Hackney smiled and said, "Nora, is there anything you can tell us that would help us understand what happened at the end of the grading term?" This meeting wasn't something I had planned for, but it was an interesting opportunity. I had all my teachers and my parents in one place. I could make a big impression on everyone all at once. So I tried to stay calm, and I decided I needed to say something remarkable. I needed to find something surprising, something that would make everybody wonder. I said, because I was trying to think of something amazing. And then I said, "Well," because I was still thinking, and then I found it, the perfect thing to say. I said, "I guess I didn't do very well in my classes and everything, but I'm not mad about my grades. I like D's." I felt my mom and dad stiffen. Miss Hackney paused a moment, and then slowly she said, "You like D's? What do you mean, Nora?" "You know, D's," I said. "D's have a pretty shape." And I kept this blank, happy little smile on my face. Oh, wait, let me say that again then. "D's have a pretty shape." The room went dead silent, and I realized another fact. When I need to be, I'm a pretty good actor. Miss Hackney was the first person in the audience to come back to life. She said, "That's very interesting, Nora." Miss Hackney glanced once around the table and said, "Well, perhaps we've got enough to think about for right now. I know everyone here will be working to help Nora earn better grades in this new term, and I know all our staff will do their best to stay in touch with her parents." She paused, and then she said, "There is one other thing, something I talked about with Mr. and Miss Rowley this morning. I suggested that it might be helpful if we give Nora some additional evaluation, and they've agreed. That way we can know the best kind of help to offer. So this is a heads up because Dr. Trindler might need to take Nora out of class now and then over the next few days." Looking around the table with a smile, Miss Hackney said, "All right then, if no one has anything else, our little meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming." I looked at the clock. The meeting had only lasted 9 minutes. It had felt longer than that. Probably it felt a lot longer to my mom and dad. Out in the hall, my dad said, "Do you have all your things, Nora? I'm going to drop you two off at home." I nodded, so we went out the door. When we got outside, I had to trot to keep up with my mom. And when we were halfway to the car, she said, "What in the world were you talking about in there, Nora? You like the shape of D's? What did you mean by that?" I shrugged. "Nothing, it was just something to say." My dad muttered more like something that made no sense. There wasn't much chit-chat in the car during the ride home, so I analyzed the situation, and here's what I came up with. 1, I had a gang of grown-ups thinking about my grades. 2, plus they were all convinced I was an idiot. 3, my mom was so upset she couldn't chat. 4, my dad was ready to take a punch at someone. 5, the school was doing some additional evaluation of me. And I decided that all in all, it had been a pretty good day.